Hey, what's up? My name's Conan. I'm a first-year internal medicine resident at UC Davis. Rank season is coming up, so I thought I'd make a video on my top 5 tips for helping you make your rank list, and also stick around for my own personal rank list and how I chose my programs. So let's get straight into it.
Big fumble goes down. Something pushes in.
He's got this army completely surrounded. He's got
A beautiful heel coming down from Subby.
My first tip is to really prioritize location in your rank list, and this is something you probably are all already doing. I think for most people it's their priority, and so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but location is really probably the most important factor in residency. I think it's really important for you to choose somewhere that's close to family and friends if possible, and also factor in the cost of living. For example, right now I'm living in Sacramento, which is pretty great because we have a low cost of living compared to the rest of California. And I actually think that makes a big difference in how your residency experience will be, because when you have more expendable income, it's obviously going to make your quality of life a lot better. And if you're paying a majority of your check to rent every month, it's going to make things a lot tougher. And for some people, knowing that the city that they're going to is going to be a fun place for them to live is also really important. So that should also go into your decision. My second tip is to really factor in the feel of the program that you got during interview day. Obviously, it's going to be a lot tougher for you guys this year with coronavirus and not being able to visit in person. But for me personally, I factored this heavily into my decision. I had a few programs where it really seemed like a positive experience. I had positive interview questions. They really knew my CV well. Whereas other programs, I could really tell that they hadn't looked over my CV. They asked a lot of negative questions like, oh, where do you think you're going to fail? Or what do you think your biggest weakness is? And I think it's tough to judge an entire residency program based on one interviewer that you might have happened to have that day. But I really think it is important because it gives you a sense of how much the program will care for you once you're in residency. You should also think about whether you thought the residents at that program seemed happy and well taken care of. Because residency is going to be tough no matter what and no matter where you're going to do it. But you want to make sure you're going to a program that is not going to add additional stress on top of the stress of residency. So again, really take into account the feel of the program you got during interview day and factor in things like how positive the interview experience was, how well they knew your CV, because I think that's a good indicator of how much they're going to be invested in you as a resident, and also your impression of how happy the residents were on interview day. My third tip is to really think about the quality of the training that you're going to be getting at each program. Overall, I think the quality of the training will be pretty good no matter where you go because of the regulations that ACGME has on residencies. But I think there's a lot of factors that you should take into account. One of the big questions that most people ask is whether they should do an academic or community program. I personally feel that academic programs probably get more interesting and possibly esoteric cases. Obviously, there's a much stronger foundation for research if that's something you're interested in. And if you're looking for fellowships, that's also important as well. And you have an easier path to go into fellowship from an academic program. However, I think my impression of community programs is that they actually seemed to be kind of a happier feel in general. They seemed more close-knit. And I think people got a stronger training in the fundamentals of their specialty. Going into a community program, I think you still have plenty of opportunity to go into a fellowship based on all the rank lists that I saw when I was interviewing. But obviously, if you're going to a top tier or you want to go to a prestigious institution, then it's not going to really be as feasible from a community program. So again, overall, I think you're going to get good training no matter where you go. Just try and decide whether you prefer a community training where you might get stronger in the bread and butter of medicine versus academic where it might open you up to more research, fellowship opportunities, and you'll get to see more interesting cases that don't get transferred out of the hospital. My fourth tip is to really think about the size of cohort that you want in your residency program. So for me, I personally wanted a mid-sized program, and I thought it was really important to me because there were some programs that I interviewed at that had like 50 or 60 people, and I had already gone to a big undergrad, a big medical school, and I felt like going to such a big program, you would totally just be a number, and you would basically just be lost in the ocean. I feel like with programs of that size, it can be harder to get to know everybody, and also the attendings won't really get to know you over the course of your residency either. And this is obviously only really a big problem probably with internal medicine, as most other specialties don't have such large residency sizes. On the other end of the spectrum, you have really small programs like 8 or 9 people, and I really felt like they were very tight-knit. They felt like families. But with programs of that size, one of the big downsides is that nobody's going to have time off at the same time, so it's going to be difficult to hang out together. And if somebody does get sick, then coverage is obviously a lot more limited. So personally, I think a mid-sized program of about 20 is personally my sweet spot. And my residency program has 32 or so residents. And I think I'm fine with that as well. With that size of a program, you really get the benefit of you have coverage if people get sick. You have a large group of people to hang out with, so you know that you'll find your friend group within there. But also, it's small enough that you're going to be able to get to know everybody, and the faculty and administration will also get to know you. So I think you should really factor in how big of a residency you want. For me personally, I liked a mid-sized program, and so that should be something you take into account as you make your rank list. My fifth tip for making your rank list is to think about the schedule at each program you are going to. I think there's three main things that you should take into account when you're thinking about the schedule of a program. For internal medicine, you obviously have the X plus Y versus the non-X plus Y schedules. And then for all residencies in general, you should think about whether you do drip admissions or bolus admissions, and also how many 24, 28-hour calls you do. So for internal medicine, X plus Y is absolutely huge, and I think should be a big priority for you. Obviously, it's not the be-all, end-all, but it really makes a huge difference knowing that you have dedicated outpatient blocks where you're going to have golden weekends consistently. And it really helps you plan and be able to plan ahead for meeting up with family, doing trips, or doing fun things with friends. So really find a program that has an X plus Y schedule. I think it's definitely a huge perk. Personally, Davis has a 4+2 schedule, and then in second and third year, it's a 4+4 schedule, which is honestly kind of unheard of. There's only a couple programs that I've heard of that are 4+4. So the more outpatient weeks you can get to get that guaranteed golden weekend, the more you should rank that program higher on your list. In terms of bolus versus drip admissions, I think I actually have a pretty good perspective on this because we rotate at 3 different sites here at Davis, and we get the opportunity to kind of experience all 3. Personally, I think bolus admissions is the superior call schedule. The advantage of a drip system is that you might have more consistent learning because you're admitting new patients every day and you're going to have more active patients throughout. So it's kind of more interesting in that regard. The problem with drip systems is that because you never know if a patient is going to come in or not, you can never leave work early, even if you finished all of your work. With bolus admissions, once you finish your work on non-call days, you can go home. And this is honestly a huge benefit because on some of my rotations where I do a Q5 long call, I was going home at like 2 p.m. on non-call days, and that was really huge for me. I actually really like the system that we have at Davis because we have a Q5 long call, so you had to stay late on the long call day, obviously, in case a patient comes in. But we also have this pickup day where you get overnight admissions. But even though you still get these new patients and you're learning about them and you get some teaching on them, you still can leave early once you finish your work. I will say, though, that if you have a drip system and your admitting time ends early, like 2 or 3 p.m., it's not that bad. And you can still go home early because that's kind of what we have at Kaiser. And I don't feel like it was a bad system at all. And finally, the last point is you should take into account the number of 24 and 28-hour calls into your rank list. The less, the better, honestly. There's been plenty of research showing how bad and detrimental 24, 28-hour calls is for the residents and for patients. There is the argument that there's more continuity with those type of calls, but I think the risks definitely outweigh the benefits in this case. So the less 24, 28-hour calls, the better. All right, and I want to share one last tip before I share my own personal rank list for you guys. And that's really to consider how happy you think you'd be at each program. And that's obviously a huge combination of factors, including all the things we talked about before, like location, training, and call schedule, stuff like that. But you're going to be spending the next 3 to 7 years of your life at this program, and you should really choose where you're going to be happy, most happy. I think we all can sometimes get caught up in the search for prestige and for clout and getting the best program with the best reputation. But I think at some point we need to consider when we want to stop the rat race and just really focus instead on being happy and enjoying life. I know this was a difficult thing for me, and it probably will be for you, because for me, I was still very conflicted about trying to get the highest reputation program too, but also balancing happiness at the same time. But now looking back, I think if I were to do anything differently with my rank list, I think I would have probably ranked some of my community programs higher than the higher reputation academic centers and prioritize location and happiness instead over prestige. All right, those are my 5 tips for making your rank list, and also my bonus tip for trying to think about where you think you'll be most happy. And now I'm going to take you and show you my rank list and talk about how I made my own personal rank list. So here are my initial preferences before I started applying. Basically, I sorted them into like a high tier, mid tier, and low tier group. And primarily, this was based on location and reputation. Emory, I have up here because my wife is from Atlanta, so that was a really good location for us. But these other ones obviously were all NorCal because I'm from NorCal, so that was a really good location for me. And then here's just my interview invites sorted by rank. If it's white, that means they didn't respond. Red obviously means they rejected me. And green is they gave me an interview invite. I will put my stats down in the video description down below if you are curious. And finally, here's my final rank list. And I'm going to just talk really briefly about how I chose all of these. And these are the med school Reddit rankings of all of these programs. I love so many aspects about Davis, and I really couldn't find any negatives about it. It has a strong reputation, great location for me, very positive culture and overall vibe. My interview day was super positive. Fellowship opportunities I thought would be strong at UC Davis, and also the program director was really amazing. So UC Davis was a clear number one for me. Cedars-Sinai was my number 2 pick, and that was because of its decent reputation and location. It had a really good pay, positive culture, and overall vibe. It's kind of like a community program, but kind of like an academic reputation. Very good cohort size. I believe it was one of my favorites in terms of cohort size, about 20, 25 people. Only thing is now in retrospect, it has a very bad schedule. They had like Q4 overnight call, even on regular floors. And I think I didn't realize at that time how important that would be. But I think now, taking that into account, I might have dropped Cedars-Sinai a little bit lower than it was on my final rank list. Third was UNC. Obviously, UNC has a really great reputation. I thought the area was a nice place, would be a nice place to live and start a family. There's obviously a ton of fellowship opportunities. I also thought they had a really good cohort size. It's just not the best location for me because I don't have any family in North Carolina. I did have a friend from North Carolina, one of my best medical school friends. And it's sort of close to Atlanta where my wife's family is from, but overall not the best location. UC San Diego, obviously very similar to UNC. They were quite a bit of a toss-up for me, but great reputation, decent location because it's still in California, good fellowship opportunities, and a beautiful hospital. I guess the only reason that I ranked it lower than UNC was the cost of living, so I thought UNC might be a little bit better in that scenario. UT Southwestern was actually the highest ranked program on my list, but I ranked it below other ones. And I think if I were to go back, I probably would have ranked it a little bit lower. Obviously, it's got one of the strongest reputation out of all the programs on my list. Had a good cost of living in Dallas, fellowship opportunities, and a beautiful hospital. But the large cohort size, I think I would factor that even more heavily into my list if I were to do it again today. 50 or 60 people, I just truly feel like nobody's going to know who you are, and you're not going to have a very personalized experience at that kind of a residency program. And I think people are going to survive and thrive in that environment. But I think for me, I was looking for something a little bit more personal. And so this program, I think, just wouldn't have been for me. If anything, I think I would have ranked some of these community programs like the Kaiser's a little bit higher. So Kaiser Oakland, I love this program. The program director was amazing. I looked at their fellowship match list. They had very good opportunities, very good location. Only downside, I guess, is a slightly lower reputation because it's a community program and it's non-academic. But this program, I was seriously considering ranking like third, very high on my list. Kaiser San Francisco is pretty similar. Also had an amazing program director, good opportunities for fellowship, and good location in Northern California, but I really don't like San Francisco. San Francisco is just not my type of city, and it'd be very high cost of living. But one thing to note about the Kaisers is that they're community programs that give very high compensation compared to the other programs, and that was actually a pretty big perk. 8th on my list was Jefferson, which was my home institution. Obviously a great program. I would have loved to stay at Jefferson. I would have been familiar with the program, would have had great fellowship opportunities, but it was just a bad location for me. Obviously I have a lot of friends in Philly, but I just have no family there, and it's far from both Atlanta and Northern California. 9 was Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. Had an okay reputation, and I had a decent interview experience. One red flag for me was that only 2 residents showed to dinner, and they did not seem very enthusiastic about the program. They seemed pretty tired and overworked, so that was a pretty big negative for me. But I felt like they had a little bit stronger of a fellowship match than Highland Hospital, which I actually was very surprised by. I liked Highland Hospital. It was the lowest tier program in terms of ranking on my list, but when I went to interview day there, I was very impressed by the faculty and didactics. They had very good compensation, but obviously the big downsides for this program were the very decreased opportunities for fellowship and the lower reputation compared to other programs on my list. 11th on my list was USC, and I honestly, if I were to go back, I would probably have applied to less programs. You could see in the previous page that I applied to 31 programs, and I really didn't need that many, and I really didn't need this many interviews. So when I went to USC, it was my last interview. I really disliked the cohort size of over 50 residents, and obviously I gone into the interview already feeling like a very perceived negative culture of the program and numerous scandals over the past several years, which just caused this program to be way, way lower on my list. And then next I had UC Irvine, which was basically a lot of things that I didn't like about this program, which caused me to rank it so low, was that the program director was leaving. The residents were really, really nice, but they seemed overworked. And I just wasn't impressed at Morning Report. And finally, last on my list was Kaiser Santa Clara. And, they had great residents. I thought the program overall was a really good one. But one of the reasons I ranked it last was I didn't feel like it was going to be a great place for me because the program director barely showed up to interview day. And both my interviewers were just super negative, which left a very bad impression on me. So as I said in the main video, having the positive interview experience, I think actually should make a decent impact into your decision as you make your rank list. And having these negative interviewers really did make a big difference for me, and I think justifiably so. So anyways, that's my rank list. That's my video, and please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.